This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, real MVPs, and welcome into another episode of What's Your Fantasy? I'm Brandon Swanson, and across the table from me is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And we've got another great episode for you. We have lots to talk about, some breaking news. It may not be as breaking when this comes out, but it really is breaking right now here this evening. And before we get into all of that, I would be remiss if I did not say, if you want to be a patron, head over to patreon.com and you can become a patron for just $1 a month. You can help support this podcast or all podcasts at MVP, or any podcast at MVP, I guess I should say. For just $1 a month, you can help make our dreams come true. Now, come on. If that doesn't get you, I don't know what will. But now, Ricky.
Also, I'm going to throw out there two things. One,
throw out two things.
This is a exclusive from our Discord. There's a little competition, I think, brewing in our Patreon community because Sam, one of our patrons who offered us a trade that I just kind of let decline because I did not like the trade and you did not either. It just didn't have enough in there for us. He was like, I think I'm the first patron to be on 2 podcasts. And Dave's like, Ricky usually keeps the stats on that because, Ricky's on every podcast. And while going through, I figured out that after this Sunday, Pat Hill, one of our patrons, is a Superfans, a Too Old to Game. I mean, we don't really do Too Old to Game anymore, but if he wanted to, he can come on that. But a What's Your Fantasy, a Superfans. He's like 2 or 3 podcasts away from hitting for the cycle, where he's almost been on every single MVP podcast.
That's impressive. We should make a medal for that.
And we have not gotten one. Well, he'll get a statue. When we get the MVP studios, we'll have the Pat Hill statue out in front, kind of like the Jordan statue outside the UC. We'll have the Pat Hill statue, the first patron to be on every podcast. Oh, and an MVP podcast he hasn't been on, and he's like, I got to be on one of those because Christian was on one of those. But the second thing, more importantly, that I wanted to say is, on top of, to kind of staple this to the Patreon push. If you're out there like, guys, that's great, but I don't have $1 to give you, but you got Amazon Prime? Because if you got Amazon Prime, you can still help us out. Go to twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast. Amazon Prime gives you a free sub every single month. You can give that to us, and it doesn't cost you a thing. So if you don't want to be a patron, you can't give the $1, you have Amazon Prime, give us that free sub on twitch.tv/mostvaluablepodcast. You could still help us out.
Thank you, Amazon. Jeff, how do you say it? Bezos?
Yeah, whatever.
Something like that.
Apparently millions of people showed up for their job fair and they're like, hey, I want to be an engineer. It's like, you're not going to be an engineer. They're going to get you to be like a stockroom guy.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking, where most of the people that were being interviewed at that job fair that Amazon had.
Poor guys. Poor guys, all I can say. Speaking of poor guys, Ricky, our team is not good.
Well, I would like to start out with some good before getting into the bad. Let's start baseball because that's been good all year. We're still in first place. Eric's making it a run. Like, I will
knock it off, Eric.
Like,
knock it off, Eric.
You know what? I gotta tip my hat. I gotta give a round of applause to Eric because I was kind of cocky earlier this year. I remember on a podcast doing this, Brandon, where I looked down and visibly looked down at the rest of our league.
You definitely did that.
But you want to know what? Eric's been making moves. Besides us, we've made the most moves in the league. Eric's right there behind us. He's got the second most moves in this league. We are at 70 points overall. Eric is right behind us at 68. The next person behind him is Team Vasquez. They're at 58.5. So really it's a 2-dog race getting down to the end. And here's why I'm confident we will win. And I'm going to give you the pitch right here. Is our 2 big problem areas is
would
basically
be the Cub players that we have.
No. It's not even that. So pitching, we're phenomenal at. We're either first or second in every single category except for saves. But saves were fourth. For hitting, we're second in RBIs, fourth in runs, home runs, stolen bases, but sixth in average. We got a bad average. Like, our players don't like to hit for average. However, I was looking at this the other day. If you look at runs, the next person below us, we're at 1,004. The next person below us is at 980. We're not going to fall a spot by the end of the year. There's not enough games for us to fall below the person who's below us. Home runs, same thing. We're 20 home runs in front of the person behind us. I don't think that person is getting 21 more home runs than us by, Sunday is the end of the MLB season. RBIs, same thing. We're at 1,008. The person below us is at 984. We're safe there. We're not going to lose any points. Stolen bases is close. We could lose 1 point because we're at 100, and then we got Team Spencer is at 98. So really, we could lose 1 point, which would bring us to 69. 69. But Eric,
honestly, I'd be okay with that.
But Eric, if he stays at 68, we're okay. It's average that is the linchpin, because right now we're at an average of 2,683. Person below us is 2,656. I feel like we're safe from falling, but we can climb. The person above us, 2,689. Then we've got 2,704. Like, I think we can. I picked up some guys that can help us with average. I think that's where we strike. We're high enough in the other areas that even if we lose that 1 point in stolen bases, I think we'll have enough to hang on by Sunday and be kings of the first ever MVP Fantasy Baseball League.
Well, I sure hope so, Ricky, because you have practically done this by yourself this year.
And didn't I tell you the strategy works? I boasted about it all the time that, hey, I won a Fantasy Baseball League by picking just pitchers. Well, we picked just pitchers to start. Like, we went Verlander, Scherzer. They're going to be our aces. And they have locked it fucking down for us. I mean, Lucas Giolito's been a good pickup. Cole Hamels was, I think we drafted him, but he was a good draft pick. Not Domingo Santana. The Yankee pitcher, Herman.
Is it Domingo Herman?
Yeah, Domingo Herman. He was good before he got injured. Was rock solid for us most of the year. Is it Minor with Max Fried is who I'm thinking of with the Braves. He was another good one for us. So we've had some good pickups, plus not going with Bryce Harper and going with Javi Baez seemed like a good pick for most of this year. But now let's get into the bad, and that's our fantasy football team, where we lost Brandon by 14 points, like around 14 points this past week. If I would have played the Jets D, we would have had our first win. Jets D, I didn't think was going to score many points because I'm like, oh, the Patriots are going to blow them out. Like, they're not going to score any. But I didn't expect them to get a safety, 2 defensive touchdowns, an interception. They had 15 fantasy points, where I was like, fuck me. And the Falcons had 0 fantasy points. I'm like, fuck me. So really, that was, if we would add those 15 points, we would have won by like a point, which would have gave us our first win. I'd be fucking dancing on the roof, but we're not. Here's the conundrum, though. Trading Marlon Mack, because that's the guy we shopped out last week. Sam gave us a trade that we just politely said no thanks to. And that trade was as follows, if I can pull it up, because my tablet decided to say, no, I don't want to pull it up. The trade that he offered us was, so we would give up Mack, Jared Cook, and the Falcons D. He would give us the Steelers D, Jared Goff, and Hayden Hurst. I only said no to this because we would need a running back in return. If I'm giving up Marlon Mack, my big thing, and I don't know if you agree with me, I want a running back in return. Like, I'm not giving up Marlon Mack to get just
I also
a good
want a
quarterback.
receiver. We don't need a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted...
You can't just throw out random people and hope that they like them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how you do it. Put some strategy in. We don't need Jared Goff.
I know we don't, Brandon. I'm just saying he's not bad, but like we just don't need him. Here's the trade that I want to throw out, and this is to ass interference or a money sign interference because he offered this. Do we offer this trade back at him because of the news we are going to lead the show off with, Brandon? He offered us way back. This was, what date was this? I can't even see. Oh, that's what, early September, because the trade offer expired on the 16th of September. Do we go ahead and offer ass interference, the offer he proposed us, where we would give up Marlon Mack and TJ Hockenson, and he would give us Melvin Gordon, Will Fuller, and Mike Davis?
Say it again.
So we would give up Marlon Mack, TJ Hockenson. He offered us Melvin Gordon, Will Fuller, Mike Davis. I don't even know if he'd want to make that. If you're listening, let us know. Comment section. But
I don't need Mike Davis.
I don't know. Yeah, but if
we don't need Mike Davis.
But if we get Melvin Gordon and Will Fuller?
Yeah, but we don't need Mike Davis. He can take Mike Davis out of the trade.
Yeah, but even if Mike Davis is in the trade, it's like, yeah, we'll just drop him. Or we'll drop that, Justice Hill? Like, we've got, and then drop Mike Davis to get somebody else. Like, it's not a linchpin. It's not like we've got a guy on the bench that's like, ooh, we got to keep him. Our team sucks, Brandon.
We're not good.
Like, that's a deal where it's like, I don't know if after 2 weeks he wants to make that deal, but I'm looking back at that deal like, oh, maybe we should have made that deal because we would have been 0-2 anyways. Oh, like, fantasy football. The 18-team league has been fun.
It's been interesting. How big has it been in the past?
Well, when Mike Rankin ran it for us one year, we did a 20-man league.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was insane. Yeah, I think going to 18 was a little bit overzealous.
You think?
On my part. I don't even know if 16 would have been a good idea.
12 is nice.
I know people do 16-man leagues.
12 is nice.
Brandon's like, I like more players being available, especially at the running back position. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just... It's been rough, but I'm trying to turn around this ship. So should I offer that trade at least to ass interference to see if he'll take it?
I am gonna say don't do anything quite yet. Don't do anything quite yet. All right. And the reason I say that is
stay pat.
Just hold pat for a second. Hold pat is because, and I'm trying to find it right now. Mm-hmm. Here we go. Is because getting into our first topic of the day, the breaking news this evening, Adam Schefter tweeting out an hour ago, about 6:30 on Tuesday. This is Tuesday now. Mm-hmm. Holdout running back Melvin Gordon called the Chargers within the past hour, told them he will report back to work Thursday, per source. That's big news. That's big news. Melvin Gordon, and we said it right here. On this podcast, you and I did, Ricky, and we both agreed. We did not think Melvin Gordon would be playing this season.
No, I didn't think so.
We did not think he'd be playing this season. We thought that he'd be holding out for the entire year. And I think Ricky was maybe more on this bandwagon that if he did end up playing, it would not be for the Los Angeles Chargers. Mm-hmm. So the Los Angeles Chargers have opened up the season as we go into week 4 and the first week of buys at 1-2. Their first win, an overtime win to the Colts, that could have gone the other way to the Indianapolis Colts. It was a well-played game by them. Week 2, they lose on the road at Detroit. The Chargers lost to the Lions. Should not have happened. Their backup kicker, their punter, missed a number of field goals. Could have won that game easily. Week 3, at home, they lose a game that they were leading in to the Houston Texans. Come to week 4, 1-2 are the Los Angeles Chargers Their September woes continue. Ricky, Melvin Gordon says he's going to be reporting to the team Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, this is not Tuesday, this is Wednesday. I said this is Tuesday, this is Wednesday. I have my days off, clearly.
Well, usually we record on Tuesdays, but this year it's been different.
Work will do that to you. So if he does report to the team now talking tomorrow, or
today, as you're listening to this.
Man, I'm all fucking confused
now.
Well,
I mean, it's going to be Thursday when this goes out.
When this comes out, it'll be Thursday. The hell with it. Is he going to have his rollback? Austin Eckler's done a very formidable job. They haven't lost the games because Austin Eckler's played poorly. They've lost the games because they've blown it. They've blown it. They've missed big kicks.
Should have beat the Lions.
Their defense has given up big plays. I mean, the Houston Texans, you texted me and you said, should I be worried about Deshaun Watson? And then he went off for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and I said, I don't think so.
To where I'm like now in one of my other leagues, I was thinking, our keeper league. I was like, should I be looking at Atkins? Like, I need a tight end. I'm like, Atkins had a really good week last week, but then I'm looking at everything like, no, he's boom or bust. Like, don't expect last week to be an every week thing. To where I was like, all right, maybe you're right, but I really need a tight end. I'm not worried. As an Austin Eckler owner, I am not worried for this week. I may not even be worried for the rest of the year. But I'm definitely not worried for this week because unless Melvin Gordon has been in phenomenal football shape the entire year, I don't expect him to be in phenomenal football shape. And what I mean by that is not like coming in with a little chub to where it's like, oh man, you got to work that off. But I expect Melvin Gordon to come in preseason rusty. And what I mean by that is he hasn't been in the games, hasn't been going through the same regiments, kind of like at the beginning of the year when you had all the analysts say, well, expect the first few weeks to be a little bit rusty because nobody played in the preseason. That's what I expect from Melvin Gordon, where it's like, I don't expect a big boom game this week, but okay, after this week, maybe starting in week number, what would it be, 5? Okay, now we can talk about him taking away significant amount of carries from Austin Eckler. But even at that point, I might not even be worried long-term about Eckler's fantasy output as an Eckler owner.
Now, Ricky, does Melvin Gordon even play this week?
Probably, maybe not.
Do you believe he even plays this week? So, you look to a similar situation, similar as in terms of coming back and then playing that week was Ezekiel Elliott. Mm-hmm. So Ezekiel Elliott, I think, reported back to the team the first week on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Ends up playing on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So Gordon, if this does prove to be accurate and correct, and it sounds like it will be, that he shows up to the team Thursday, does he play Sunday? And then if he does, I mean, you look at what Ezekiel Elliott did. I know they're two different players, two different people, and Elliott went against the Giants defense that lets pretty much anything through, and he did pretty well. He didn't play a ton of snaps. You could tell that because Dak had a huge day, and he didn't need a run. But Melvin Gordon, when he's been in there, he has been used early and often in the running game. He's been used very often in the passing game. Is this going to be a situation, Ricky, where he comes, it's still earlier in the season, it's just week 4. Yes, there's going to be rust. Does that rust hang on to him for the entire season? And then Austin Eckler did a formidable job when he was in there. Is this now going to be a committee situation because they've seen that Eckler's done very well? Are they going to keep him in there or have Eckler in there more, where this almost, from a fantasy perspective, ruins Melvin Gordon?
Well, I don't want to say it ruins Melvin Gordon. I don't want to say it ruins Austin Eckler because last year, I'm looking at Eckler because Melvin Gordon was the main guy. You look at last year, Eckler was very boom or bust, going with just the Pro Football Reference. I know every league is different, but I'm using this as a basis. This was Eckler's numbers week by week. 18.6, 9.8, 5.1, 11.6, 11.9, 6, 6.8, 3.4, 1.9, 6.9, 16.3, 4.3, 15.4, 11.8, to where Austin Ekeler, if it's going to be Melvin Gordon's the starter, Eckler's the bench player, the thing that it takes away with Ekeler is he's going to be, I feel like, I question, is it going to be like last year where it's very boom or bust, where Ekeler, to get those big points, it's how many scores is Ekeler going to get? But here's even a question I have, because the first thing we have to look into is, why is Melvin Gordon coming back now? Is it something, because to me there's two sides to this. It could be one of two things. The good for the Chargers, I'll start off with that. He's coming back because he's had talks with the Chargers and he's going to get paid. That's the best option if you're a Charger fan. If that's the case, I see him stepping in to be the starter then. But there could be the situation of he could be looking at it going, like the Chargers could have came to him on the DL and said, hey, we've been talking to teams. Teams don't want to give up a first for you. That's what we want. We want a first. We have given this is our asking price for you. Teams don't want to budge on that. Don't want to give us that because you're not playing. Because they don't want a Le'Veon Bell situation. That could also be it, where he's like, fine, I'll come back and play so that I can show other teams that I want to play, and then you can trade me because I'm actually doing something on the field. In that situation, I kind of have a weird thought in my head, is if he's not coming back to get paid, could there be a situation where the Chargers front office, I'm going to say front office because I don't know if the coach would do this because the coach is just trying to win games, but I wonder if the Charger front office is going to say and kind of extend this to the coaching staff of, he's coming back, but he's kind of stood against us. Austin Eckler's won the job. It's Eckler's job. Eckler's the starter until Melvin Gordon proves otherwise. Or Eckler's the starter until he falters and Melvin Gordon can take the job back. That's the big question. Is Melvin Gordon going to be handed the job because he's Melvin Gordon? Or because of what Ekeler has done, does he have to work for it? What would you think? Because if he's getting a contract, I feel like Melvin's getting handed the job. That's what I would think if he's coming back to get paid.
If he's coming back and they're giving him a contract, I feel like you almost have to be paying him. You're not going to be paying a guy.
Well, you have to start him if you're paying him, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to pay him, this money and give him, this contract of $10 million plus a year, you don't have that guy to be a backup. You just don't. Mm-hmm. You just don't. He's maybe coming now because he's coming at a time where he thinks, okay, teams 1 and 2, they're having their usual struggles. I can come in. They need me. They need my ability. Maybe he's thinking he's coming in at a good time where he has the leverage. Didn't have the leverage at the beginning of the season because, truthfully, I think the stats show, and I don't have them right away, and I'm not going to go and look them up right now. I'm just being honest.
Okay.
I believe the stats show that they've been better when he hasn't been in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're talking about the Chargers have been better?
Yes.
I mean, I'll say this: the offense isn't the problem they're losing. They should be 3-0.
The offense was very much the problem. They lost game 2. It was very much the problem. They couldn't get into the end zone against the frickin' Lions.
But even with that, they make two. Their kicker makes the 2 kicks. They win the game. That's all I'm saying.
But they weren't getting touchdowns. That's a simple thing.
But he makes those kicks. I don't care. There was one, and this is why I'm going to die on this molehill, Brandon.
Yeah, go ahead and die on it because it's not going well for you.
I was watching the game on Red Zone, and it was the second one he missed, and Phillip Rivers did this. He threw his hands up what the fuck do you want me to do? I'm getting you in field.
But Phillip Rivers doesn't swear.
No, he's a man of Christ.
What the heck?
So he went, what the heck? Golly gee willikers, what are you doing? What do you want me to do? at some point, like in that situation, that one game, I look at it and it's like, yes, it's easy to say the offense didn't get into the end zone, but if the offense is going to get you in field goal range, if you're the kicker, you got to knock it down. And I know people are going to say, Ricky was the backup kicker. Doesn't matter. Your number's called. You're on an NFL roster. You're signed to an NFL roster for a reason. You got to get it done. Eddie Pinheiro has been getting it done for the Bears, and he's got all the pressure of an entire city on him. So I don't want to hear any excuses from LA's kicker, that, I didn't know I was going to play because the first stringer, I think he was dealing with the flu or something. No, not an excuse for me. So that's why that game, I'm going to die on the molehill that the special teams lost them that game, and it wasn't the offense's problem. But getting back to Melvin Gordon, I would agree with your point that they're not losing games because Melvin Gordon's not out there. They're losing games because of the special teams and the defense, more so than the offense.
And they're losing games because they can't get the ball in the end zone. But anyways, I think that...
Just say boom.
Huh?
Say boom.
Why?
Just say it.
Why?
Just say it now. Just lead me up for the punchline.
No.
Come on.
I'm not going to do it.
You want to.
I'm not going to give you the satisfaction.
Because you know who you sound like. John Madden. You can't win if you don't score enough touchdowns. Boom. That's what you sound like. But go ahead.
But I guess, Ricky, final comment on this, as we'll move into the next topic here, is Melvin Gordon coming back at this moment is interesting because I think it makes it look like he thinks he has the upper hand in terms of this contract, and that he believes the Chargers need him, and that they might be able to start winning games again with him. They've lost 2 in a row now, one to I think a very good Texans team, and one to a surprisingly successful to this point Detroit team at 2-0-1. I think that he believes, Melvin Gordon does, that he's coming in at the right time to be able to play hero. And that I think he also believes that coming in now is going to be best for him in terms of the amount of money that he might be able to make. But I do also think that another negative playing against him perhaps, is that Austin Eckler has done a really, really good job while Melvin Gordon's been away. Austin Eckler, in fact, on the season...
Is that maybe why he's coming back, because of how good Eckler has looked?
Eckler this season on 38 carries, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a 4.2 average per carry, and then 19 receptions for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Austin Eckler in the first 3 games has 4 scores and over 350 all-purpose yards. That's pretty good in the first 3 games of the season. And Ricky, to your point, very much so. That could be correct.
And here's the thing I'm just thinking about, because before I give my final thought, I want to ask you this last question, kind of put a linchpin in it. Kind of 2 sides. First, the non-fantasy side, and then the fantasy side. Number 1, non-fantasy side. If you are the Chargers, congratulations, you've just become the president of football operations and the GM of the Los Angeles Chargers. We've kicked theirs out of town. You're the new guy.
That's probably a pretty good salary.
With Melvin Gordon coming back, reporting to the team, are you paying him this year? Are you paying him, giving him a new contract this season based off of even how well Austin Eckler has looked?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Or do you look to trade him?
I'm looking to trade him.
Okay. That's kind of the situation I'm kind of leaning towards. I think Melvin Gordon might be coming back more so of like, fuck, Austin Eckler's look good. And if I wait the entire year, the Chargers might say, well, we don't need you. Bye. And also teams might not be lining up to trade for him because the Chargers haven't budged, and they shouldn't budge on their stance of, hey, this is what we want. We want a first and we want the secondary pick. And that's what they want. And in my mind, I wouldn't trade Melvin Gordon unless I'm getting a first round pick. That is the bare minimum. I need a first round pick in this year's draft for Melvin Gordon. That's if de facto. And I look at other teams around the league, and I don't feel like teams yet are in a position where it's like, oh my God, we need to trade for a running back. Because I'm just going to run down the teams really quickly. The Bills, they've got their guy in Singletary who they really like. He's a young guy, but they want to build in him. That's why they trade away LaShawn McCoy. The Patriots, they have their, the Patriots aren't going to trade a first-round pick for Melvin Gordon. They'll wait for the Chargers to cut him and then try to pick him up like they did Antonio Brown. They've got their guys. They've got Sony Michel's their main guy, but then they got White Burkhead and that committee. Dolphins aren't looking to give up first-round picks, so mark them off, although they need a running back. The Jets, they're fine with Le'Veon Bell. They gave him the money this year. Ravens have Mark Ingram. Browns have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. The Bengals have Joe Mixon. Steelers, if Big Ben is not hurt, I think we make an argument that the Steelers...
Not sold on James Conner.
Well, I'll say this. If Big Ben wasn't hurt and they didn't make the deal for Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think we're looking at the Steelers as a team to make a deal for Melvin Gordon, but they already gave up their first-round pick for Minkah Fitzpatrick.
So you're not sold on James Conner? You didn't answer my question.
I'm not sold on James Conner. I think
even after the year he had last year,
I think it was a fluke. I think it was a fluke. So far what I'm seeing, and I get Big Ben's injured, that takes away a lot, but even from when Big Ben's in there, James Conner has not been the James Conner of last year. You look at Houston, and yes, Lamar Miller is injured, but I don't know. They also gave up their first-round pick to bring in Laramie Tunsil. It's another pick that the Dolphins have. Colts have Marlon Mack. Jaguars have Leonard Fournette, although he's usually often injured. Derrick Henry's looked pretty good the start of this year for Tennessee. Chiefs, they traded for LaShawn McCoy. I don't think they make a move as well. You've got the Raiders who drafted Josh Jacobs, who's young.
The Chargers wouldn't trade him to the Chiefs.
Yeah. You've got the Broncos who have two young running backs in Freeman and Lindsey. Zeke, you've got the Eagles could be a team, but are they going to give up a first?
The Eagles already have 9 running backs.
But they don't have a guy that's like the bell cow. Like, even Jordan Howard, it's like, why have you traded for him if you're not going to use him? Giants aren't, I'm just going to run through them quickly. Giants aren't even with Saquon's injury because Saquon is the future and Saquon will be back. Redskins could. They could. Like, they're a team that I could say, maybe they go and make a trade for them, but would they want to give up that first-round pick? No one in the NFC North makes that deal. They've all got running backs or committees that they're happy with. Same with the South. Because I don't think the Bucs are giving up their draft pick. They're the only ones that I could see doing it. And then in the West, Todd Gurley, the Niners aren't in a position to trade their pick in my mind. Seattle's not going to make a move. And then the Cardinals have David Johnson. So really, in my mind, the only two teams that could make a deal for Melvin Gordon are the Eagles and the Redskins. And would they even want to give up their first-round pick to do so?
No.
Or do the Dolphins say, hey, we'll give you a first, because they've got 3 of them now. They've got 3 of them. Do the Dolphins kind of change script and go, hey, we'll give you that contract. We'll give them a contract. Let's trade for them. Not even wait until the offseason to maybe sign them. We'll trade for them, give them the money, and lock them down. And that would be our big signing. But if they had Melvin Gordon, that tanks their draft pick. And do they give up that draft pick? That's something for a different day. Last question I did want to ask you. This is the fantasy side, most important to this podcast. You're a Melvin Gordon owner. Are you starting Melvin Gordon this week?
No.
In any capacity? Flex spot?
No.
No flex spot?
Not starting him. I've got to. If he's playing, I've got to wait and see what he does.
It obviously depends on what your team looks like. If he was on our team, he'd be starting.
Well, yeah, because we suck.
If you're like us, where you're 0-3 and need a kickstart, go ahead and start him. But I would also be fine playing the game you just played of, let me be cautious. Let me sit a week. And it really depends to me what your record is. If you're 3-0, don't even waste it. Like, hey, you know what? What I got's been working. If you're 1-2, if you're 0-3, then I would sit there and go, okay, maybe I need a little bit of a kickstart. What's going for me now hasn't been helping me, that's the only way I would go ahead and start him. Is if like I'm 0-3 and it's like, shit, I need to do something in order to kickstart my offense or kickstart my fantasy team.
That's exactly what I think, Ricky. I'm with you 100%. Topic number 2. Moving into the next one, it's also dealing with a running back. A big running back injury this past weekend. Saquon Barkley goes down. Initial prognosis is high ankle sprain that is supposed to have him out anywhere from 4 to possibly 8 weeks. He is scheduled or underwent testing and was examined Monday by team consultant Dr. Martin O'Malley, ankle specialist at Hospital for Special Surgery. But Barkley is scheduled to see specialist Dr. Robert Anderson on Wednesday for an additional opinion. That was Chris Mortensen, and that was Mortensen yesterday saying that. So the initial estimated time was again the 4 to 8 weeks.
The initial?
You know what I meant. The initial time was 4 to 8 weeks. He gets hurt in the second quarter of that game against the Bucs. He goes down. This is huge for fantasy owners. This is huge for fantasy players, for Saquon Barkley owners. For a lot of people, Saquon is the anchor of your team. He's the anchor of your running backs.
He was your first overall pick.
Most likely your first overall pick. This one hurts. Wayne Gallman will take over. Former Clemson running back will take over in the meantime while Saquon is out. But Ricky, where do you go from here?
So I have a guy that's like, this is my main guy to pick up if you are a Saquon Barkley owner. But I want to ask you this question first. If you're a Saquon owner, are you looking waiver wire first, or are you looking to make a deal? And the reason why I ask this is most times I look to the waiver wire because I am very precious of, my team is precious to me. And usually I don't want to give somebody up. Like, I made a trade this past week because of the Saquon injury, not me needing somebody, but somebody asked me, and I'll get into that into a second. The only other trade, the last trade I made since this one this year was a couple years ago when I traded Jimmy Graham away when he was on the Saints. Jimmy Graham away to bring Rob Gronkowski to my team, and that's when Gronk, if you're horny, won our fantasy championship, my lone fantasy championship. So Rob Gronkowski, you're listening. I know you are a fan of the show. Thank you for that fantasy football championship, because I wouldn't have it without you. In your mind, do you go to the waiver wire or do you trade? Because immediately after the injury happened, my team in my personal league is a rich running back team. Dalvin Cook, Marlon Mack, I've got Le'Veon Bell, and I had Joe Mixon just sitting there on my bench. Joe Mixon I hadn't started this year because he's been diddly squat, or as the great Jim Morris Sr. would say, diddly poo. The first 2 weeks of the season, finally had a big game where he had 15 fantasy points this past week. And Sean Anderson, who was a Saquon owner, came a-knocking and said, hey, are you willing to trade some of your guys? And I said, hey, offer me a couple deals. I'll see which one I liked. And immediately after he texted me, I was texting you like, hey, what would you, here's the two teams. What would you want for Joe Mixon? Because, I didn't even know what would be a good asking price with what he had. And me and you kind of settled on what I was thinking of, okay, Cooper Kupp would be a good guy. And he offered Kupp for Mixon straight up. I took the deal. So now Sean has Joe Mixon. I've got Cooper Kupp. But the base of my question to you is, you're a Saquon owner. Is your first instinct to trade for a guy, or is your first instinct to hit the waiver wire and see what's out there?
My first instinct is to hit the waiver wire. My first instinct is probably to go with Wayne Gallman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would go with him. He's I think a solid running back so far this season. He's only had 7 carries, 30 yards, but he got a touchdown in week 1 against Dallas. Last year, he had only 51 carries, 176 yards in a TD, 3.5 yards per carry, and then in 2017, he had 111 carries for 476 yards, no touchdowns, 4.3 yards per carry. Mm-hmm. So I'd go with Wayne Gallman. I don't think they have anybody else that they're planning on going with. And Gallman is certainly not Saquon Barkley. No one is. But I think that Gallman could be a very formidable replacement while Saquon's out.
So I'm going to go to the waiver because to me, you could go for like, if you're going to look for a trade, there's part of me that's like, Joe Mixon would be a good one. Like, and I say a good one because I don't think the asking price for a Joe Mixon would be too high because I think most of Joe Mixon fantasy owners are going to be a little bit weary about him. You could also try to go out there and trade for, like, if you're looking to trade, guys that I would target would be like a Phillip Lindsay even, because I know he had 25 week 1. I know he had 14 this past week, but he had a 6-point game as well. So it's like the inconsistency with Lindsay, you can maybe get away with not giving away the farm. And obviously I'm talking non-keeper leagues. And keeper leagues, these are guys like the next guy I was going to mention, Kerryon Johnson. Yet again, he's kind of a lower-end guy, 6 points, 10 points. His big week was against the Chargers where he had 14. Those are some guys where maybe in non-keeper leagues you can get away with, hey, I don't have to give up the farm to get a running back to supplement my pool. But I'm going to say this guy's name again. I can't remember. I think I said it last week. Yeah, I think I said his name last week in the segment we love to do at the end of the podcast where who you picking up, who you dropping. And I want to say this guy was my sneaky pickup of the week last week. Ricky's sneak pick of the week. Frank Gore, baby. Go ahead and get him. 14 points, 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row. He's gotten 14 points. I know he's going against New England this week. This week may be a little bit of a down week, but hey, Saquon's going to be out a couple weeks. You need someone. And you can't sit on Frank Gore. You can't just say, oh, well, he's available, because he's only owned in 58, maybe 59% of leagues. So there's a chance he could be available in yours. If he is, go ahead and take a stab on him. Or if you're looking for a guy to trade, he could be a guy that you can go and trade because his trade value is not going to be that high. I'm looking at it, most people, unless they've got an injury as well, and they've picked him up for that reason, he might be just sitting on someone's bench, and you can say, hey, let me give you this kind of wide receiver I'm not using. Oh, let me give you this quarterback I'm not using to help your team out. Work out a deal. He's a guy I would go and target but besides this week with the Patriot week, I think he's going to continue to produce for the Bills.
I think you're right. The way that Frank Gore played this past week was very impressive. He's a guy who's most likely not owned on a ton of teams out there.
Only 59% of leagues have him on a roster.
So I think that he's definitely a good one to go out and try and snag.
23. So 59%. I'm rounding up by 0.2. 59% of leagues have him in their league, so that means he's available in 40% of leagues. You want to know how many teams have him in the starting lineup right now? 20%. 20% of leagues have him in the starting lineup, so odds are, even if he's on a team, you could probably trade for him because that person's not going to start him this week. I mean, besides that, it's like the running back this year it's not as deep as it usually is. And mainly because, like, the one thing I'll throw out that you well know, because on one of your teams you have him, is like a guy like Adrian Peterson. Like that running back situation with the Redskins, Darius Geis goes down. He's not producing. Adrian Peterson hasn't produced. So it's like, to me, there's situations where there's just teams of running backs. Like, for example, another guy who's available in most leagues, but I don't know if I'd take a stab on him, is Ronald Jones. He had I think it was this past week where he had his like first good week. Yeah, this past week he had 12 points. But like I look at that and I go, is he going to have that consistently? Because before this, he's got 9.3, 0.9, and then his big week of 12.1.
I had Ronald Jones on my team in my big league for a week. That was the week that Peyton Barber then was the main guy. And then I dropped him. And then I picked up Peyton Barber. And then it was frickin' Jones that was the main guy.
So
I would stay far away
history
from those two assholes and not touch them because they're only going to give you headaches. I think that who was it that I was just going to mention? If you can go and get Carlos Hyde, that may not be a bad choice from the Houston Texans. Carlos Hyde didn't have a great week this past week, did get a touchdown, but he's the guy who they're really going with on the ground. Duke Johnson is just really the guy they're going to on passing downs. Hyde could be someone you slot in there while Saquon's injured.
And the thing is, during the Saquon injury, you're not going to get a guy that's going to give you the same amount of points as Saquon. Like, don't be looking for a running back that's going to give you the same production as Saquon. It ain't going to happen. Carlos Hyde owned in 54% of leagues, pardon me. But that's even another one that I looked at, but I was kind of like, he had like 8 and 7 points, I want to say, is his highest this year. And I'm kind of like you're kind of banking on he's got to get a touchdown for him to be good in fantasy. One of the guys, the last guy that I was going to mention that I was going to ask you about, but I can't find how many percentage of leagues he's owned in, if it's even that small. Yeah, it's that small. He's owned in 6% of leagues. So odds are he's available in your league. You want to know whose league he's not available in? Our 18-man league. Of course he's not available in our league. But last one I'm going to ask you about, because I'm not even sure if I would pick him up and take a roll on it. Jeff Wilson Jr., the guy with the San Francisco 49ers, because this is a guy the last 2 weeks, he's had 2 touchdowns in each game. He's scored 15.4, 13.8. Do you roll the dice and say, hey, he's been consistent these 2 weeks. I know he's on a bye this week, so you may have to find somebody else just to patch you for this one. But after that, do you roll with him being the only 2 weeks he's played? He's had 15 and 13 points, respectively.
So what have been his numbers, though? I mean, outside of his fantasy numbers, what's his touch number?
Game 1, he had 10 touches for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns, 15.4 points. Game 2 against Pittsburgh, he had 8 touches for 18 yards, 2 touchdowns, 13.8.
I just don't think
that's the touchdowns.
But that's just not enough touches for me. He's been lucky to get those touchdowns because the Niners, in the game against Cincinnati, they were up by 1 million the entire game. And then in the game against Pittsburgh, they did seem to have the game in check for a good part of it. It was a little bit of a back and forth game, but I mean, the Niners seemed to hold that one for most of it.
And after the bye in week 4, I'll give you his next 5 games. Home against Cleveland, at Rams, at Washington, home against Carolina, at Arizona.
That Cleveland game, Cleveland's defensive line's pretty stingy. I don't expect them to have all that much success there.
Yeah, he's one, though, that I look at where if you really want to roll the dice, odds are he's available in your league. You can go ahead and try to pick him up.
I'm still going to say my top pick for guys to pick up would be Wayne Gallman. Try and go for the backup who's going to be slotting in there, starting while Saquon is out. He's out probably at least 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're hurting at running back, Gallman can get you hopefully some solid numbers for 4 weeks. It can at least patch it up a little bit. And then you'll have to pull the Band-Aid off again and get back to work at another point after those 4 weeks or whatever it might be. I'm thinking it's probably going to be anywhere. It's going to be probably more towards the 6-week mark when it comes to Saquon's injury. But, Ricky, let's move into the final part of the podcast where we're talking our stardoms, our sit-ums, who we think's good for this week, and Ricky's sneaky pick of the week.
Yeah,
we're always excited about that.
I gotta find my sneak pick this week.
But Ricky, first I'm gonna go to you. Who are you sitting this week? Who should not be in your lineup this week?
Well, even if he wasn't on the bye, Le'Veon Bell. but I know he's on the bye, so I can't use him. No, if I'm looking at guys that I am sitting this upcoming week, this one's usually the hardest one for me because usually I'm like, but I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not starting Baker Mayfield this week. I'm not doing it. This year has not been the year for Baker Mayfield against Tennessee, 9.4 points, then 15 against the Jets, good game or decent game, but then 9.7 against the Rams. He's going against Baltimore, which I know you may look at it and go, it's Baltimore. They've been kind of stingy. Where Miami, I know it's Miami, but they gave up only 8.4 fantasy points to Fitzpatrick. Then Kyler Murray, who was Kyler Murray, got 16.3. And you might say, well, if Kyler Murray can do it, Baker Mayfield could do it as well. The only one to kind of crack the code against the Ravens defense has been Patrick Mahomes last week getting 3 touchdowns. But like the only reason why in my mind Murray was even going to get to 16.3 had to be because of his rushing numbers, because his passing numbers, he had 0 touchdowns and 349 yards. So for me, most of it had to come, the other half had to come from his legs. I would stay away from Baker. I don't think he's going to get, if the over-under is 14 for Baker, I'm going to say he gets under this week against Baltimore.
I think you're right. I think the Baltimore defense might get to him early and often, especially since Baltimore report came out that Baltimore not too happy that all the talk was about the Browns this offseason.
Can I also give a Ricky's drop of the week?
Yes.
If you have Jared Cook on your team, drop that bum. And I don't mean no disrespect to Jared Cook, but maybe it's the Drew Brees injury. Maybe it's just he hasn't been hauling it because he's gotten the targets. He had 7 targets in the last game. Just do as I did. Just drop him. He's not going to do you any good. Start Noah Fant because his 3 points is better than Jared Cook's 1 point. But I just wanted to get that off my chest. He's another one, too. If you're not going to drop him, obviously don't start him.
One of my sit-ems this week, and it's a guy who it's almost surprising. This season has been surprising in a bad way after a really good campaign last year, and that's going to be Sony Michel. He has been a disappointment to start this season. Week 1 point in the Pittsburgh game. His best game came against Miami, as everyone's best game seems to come against Miami this year. 12 points then, and it wasn't even, that's not even a great number, and this is in a PPR league. And then against the Jets this past week, 7 points. That's with a touchdown. So it's really been tough sledding for Sony Michel, and it's only going to get tougher this week going against Buffalo. That is not going to be fun. Buffalo's defense is pretty stingy, pretty darn good. Do not expect Sony Michel to get a lot of touches even because they've seemed to be going with Rex Burkhead, James White, and who else they got? Do they have somebody else over there too that they go to? I'm sure they'll find someone. But it seems like they have about 5 running backs that they switch off against. But Sony Michel, sitting him this week, he's been a big disappointment.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing with the Patriots is just I don't like their running back situation. Like, Sony Michel's the only one that I would feel confident with starting.
You can't even feel confident with starting him.
I mean, he would be the most one that I feel confident with if I had to. But I've had a history with them, too. I told you the story before where I was listening to, what's his name? Played for the Redskins. He fills in... is it Rex Tucker that fills in for
Ross Tucker?
Ross Tucker. Love him. Like, when he fills in for Dan Patrick, I fucking love Ross Tucker. But there was one game last year where he's like, start Rex Burkhead's going to have a big game. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm buying in on it. I'm going to start Rex Burkhead. Guess how many points he got? The big old goose egg. And I was like, never again am I even having a Patriot running back on my team because of that goose egg. And I haven't had a Patriot since. But that's my kind of Vietnam flashback whenever you bring up Patriot running backs.
So it's a little rough, huh?
It's a lot of rough.
So who else you sitting, Ricky?
Who else am I sitting? I'm trying to think. The one that I'm going to do is basically the Buffalo defense, and the reason why, like,
because the Jets defense did so poorly last week, right?
See, and that's the thing where I actually am benching the Bills defense in my personal league, because I'll even ask you this. What would you do? If you had to pick between these two defenses, which one would you play? The Bills against the Patriots, the Vikings against the Bears.
The Vikings against the Bears, that's an easy one.
And that's what I'm doing. Like, my option is, yes, I'm playing the Vikings, but, like, part of me is scared of that. Like, I know the Bills defense is good. I just don't think... I think the Jets defense got a little lucky last week. Where with the touchdowns and the scores, they got a little lucky in those placements. I don't know if the Bills defense has the same amount of fantasy success that the Jets have. So that's why I'm sitting them.
And then my other sit this week is Stephon Diggs. Mm-hmm. My gosh, what a disappointment this guy has been, and a headache too. I mean, it's been Adam Thielen or nobody, because Kirk Cousins doesn't throw it to anybody else, let alone throw it at all. So Stephon Diggs, in his first 3 games this season, 5, 9, and 4. In one of those games, the Niner, that was 1 catch, 49 yards, and a touchdown, and then a fumble. So it's been just completely, ridiculously awful for Stephon Diggs. Really, ever since the emergence of Adam Thielen, it's been awful for Stephon Diggs. If you still have him on your team, not only would I sit him, I would drop his ass. Ricky, now back to you. Mm-hmm. Who are you starting this week?
So before we get into starts,
sure,
I'm going to slide this in here. Ricky's sneak pick of the week.
All right.
I've got 2 of them this week. A daily double.
Ooh.
The first one, this is a sneak pick for this week. Start him this week too. I'm going to go with Paul Richardson.
Okay.
The reason why I'm going with Paul Richardson, not only did he have a big game against the Bears on Monday night, had 14 points, I'm kind of banking off of the success that another wide receiver had against the Giants this past week. Giants are not good defending the pass. Against Dallas, they gave up a total of 46.1 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns, over 300 yards. Against Buffalo, 27.3 fantasy points to the wide receivers and tight ends, 200 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Tampa Bay, 3 touchdowns. I believe all 3 of them were to Mike Evans. 42.9 fantasy points given up to the receivers, over 200 yards. I don't care if it's Case Keenum, if it's Dwayne Haskins. I think that Paul Richardson's going to get some numbers, or have a chance to get some big numbers, get close to that 15 points that he was kind of sporting this week in fantasy against the Bears. He will get that. The other sneak pick of the week comes from another receiver, but of the tight end variety. I don't know, and this is the one I don't know if he has a big week this week, but I think overall as the season goes on, he will start to have games more like he did against Cincinnati. Dawson Knox, go and pick him up now, even if it's to sit on your bench for this week to get through the New England. Or if you're like, fuck it, I'm going to play him against New England. He's a guy that can, he only had 4 targets, made him count though, with catching 3 of them. Had 13.6 points this past week against Cincinnati. I know it's Cincinnati, but looking at Josh Allen, looking at how this team likes to ball out through the air, he might become a favorite target, especially with Cole Beasley not being the Cole Beasley we expected him to be early on this season.
2 very interesting sneak picks
that's
of
why they're called,
the week.
That's why they're called sneak picks.
Very interesting.
Very sneaky. They'll slip right by you if you let them.
So now go to your starts.
My start, Jacoby Brissett. He's the first one. Like I had him lined up because I thought you were going to hit me with the starts off the bat. He's been a guy that our boy Shane O'Mac on Twitter, I got to give him some love because he tweeted at me this week after the Colts game and such, and Stephen Holder had a tweet where it said, Jacoby Brissett today, 28 of 37, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns, no INTs, 118 quarterback rating. The Colts would have taken that kind of production from Andrew Luck 10 times out of 10. y'all still want to complain about number 7. And my boy Shane O'Mac hit me up and said he's proved he can pass the ball and balled out really happy to see Brissett doing that well and shut up all the haters, but give Reich credit for the incredible play calling. What do you think of the Colts and Brissett? And I basically said I think they can live up to the 10-6 prediction that I had for them in the preseason. I'm going ahead and I'm starting them this week because they're going up against Oakland. He's going to feast. He's going to do this all day, every day. Eat that soup, eat that oatmeal, whatever's in the bowl that he's eating. Like Zeke, James Harden, whatever's in that bowl, that Wheaties, Jacoby Brissett's going to be eating this week against Oakland.
My first start this week is you've got to be starting Terry McLaurin. He has been outstanding. 23 points, 17 points, 19 points. This guy is good. I don't know how he flew under the radar with so many people, but he has been outstanding. Terry McLaurin, if you didn't know his name before, you definitely do now. He better be in your starting lineup.
So I got another one. And this guy, I know, I traded him away. Question mark. Joe Mixon. And the reason why? He's going up against Pittsburgh, baby. Pittsburgh has not been good against running backs. They gave up 18.8 against New England week 1, but then ever since 21.2 to the running backs of Seattle, 1 score, and then to the San Francisco 49ers, 33.6 points to their running backs, 2 scores to the same guy, Jeff Wilson Jr. Joe Mixon had a great game against, I'm going to say great game, a bounce back game after tweeting out to the fantasy owners that, you know what, I'm going to play better for you guys. You like that when a player says he's going to play better for you guys and not do the whole, oh, who was it? I'm trying to think. Jacksonville running back. Bowling ball.
Fournette.
No, way before Fournette. He was the little Mercedes. No, not Mercedes. MJD. Maurice Jones-Drew. Where he's the kind of guy where it's like, fuck it, I'll kneel on the one, let the backup get the touchdown because middle fingers up to the fantasy owners. Joe Mixon ain't about that life. He's going to get some points against the Steelers this week. Monday Night Football. Bengals. They could be breaking into the win column given the Dolphins 2 0-4 first-round picks, keeping both those picks for the Dolphins in the top 5, maybe even top 3.
2-0-4?
Yeah, because the Dolphins will be 0-4 and the Steelers will be 0-4, and the Dolphins have that pick
2
now.
0-4s. Okay, yeah.
Dude, if the Dolphins get, let's say the Steelers are that bad, the Dolphins get pick 1, pick 2, I don't know, man. That'd be really good for Miami. But I'm in draft mode. I love draft. Draft.
And Mike Tomlin is going to be seeing himself out.
You think so?
I don't know. If
Minkah Fitzpatrick played well, so it's not like they gave up the first-round pick for nobody.
No, I'm just talking about the way that the season has gone.
Oh, yeah. Well, Big Ben's injured. They can just say that's the excuse.
They can, but maybe they'll say, hey,
no AB either.
You've done a phenomenal job while you've been here, but we've got to move in a different direction. Mm-hmm. We're moving in a different direction with this team. It's making definitely, you can just tell with Pittsburgh and you feel it. No AB, good riddance. No Ben Roethlisberger. They don't have the same weapons. Mm-hmm. No Le'Veon Bell. It just feels different. They do not feel like this team that every time they played someone, they had a chance. They played New England. It was not going to be a 33-3 loss. Mm-hmm. It was going to be a 33-30 loss because they would still lose. Yeah. But it would just be a fun game. There's none of that energy around Pittsburgh.
Speaking of the Patriots, I want to ask you about this. What is your opinion of the Bill Belichick stare that was making its rounds on social media when he was asked before the game last week about Antonio Brown? And he basically gave the death stare of how dare you ask that question and I'm going to kill you. That kind of a stare.
So I think some people were talking about, it's because she's a woman. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the case because we all know Bill Belichick's a dick.
Yeah, I just agree with the one that I saw where it's wow, Bill Belichick is that much of an asshole.
But I also think it's one of those where he's had that question so many times. Mm-hmm. He's done with it. And he was given really? We're still going to throw that in here? because you know what his answer is going to be. The reporter knows what his answer is going to be. He knows what his answer is going to be. We know what his answer is going to be. It's not going to change. It's not going to be any different. It's going to be on to the next one, on to the next one. We just played the Jets, on to the next one. That's what it's going to be. So he gave the... Really? I mean, that's him, but we've come to know that that's him. So I don't take too much offense to it. When I first saw it, I'm like, dang. But then I'm like, that's him.
I was just like, man, he's an asshole. Like we know he's gonna give the asshole response of like deadpan of just like, we're on to the Jets. We're thinking about the Jets. Monotone voice, no personality. How dare I show personality? Until it's like, hey, I won the Super Bowl. All right, I can crack a smile. I can show a little bit of personality because the goal.
And then hide it again.
Yep. As soon as it's on to the next one, boom, the personality gets shoved down, shoved deep on the shelf of anger that every guy has.
But also, I guess you have to look at it and go, do you want someone who's really happy and bubbly all the time and you lose, or do you want someone who's going to be like that and you win every game?
Yeah, winning makes
I'd like someone in the middle winning, but he's pretty darn successful, so I guess he can get away with doing what he wants. But my final start this week, I'm going with Kerryon Johnson from the Detroit Lions. Reason being...
Do you have him on any of your teams?
I do.
Okay.
And I'm going with Kerryon Johnson because we all saw what Mark Ingram did to them last week, and I definitely did because he made me lose to this guy. 35 points, something
31,
like that, to Mark Ingram.
20 points from my Saints defense.
Well, that didn't help. But 31 points in a standard league for Mark Ingram against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. I don't think Kerryon Johnson will do that, but 20 is very reasonable for him this week if the Lions use him correctly, which I do believe he's getting volume and he's getting the ball at the goal line for things like that. I think it will be an interesting game. The Lions will be having to try and keep up with the Chiefs, but they have used Kerryon Johnson in the passing game as well. But we saw this past week that it was the running game that really scored a lot of the points for the Baltimore Ravens. So my final start this week, it is Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up really quick. I beat you 129 to 102. Oh, can I not look at the... Oh, I can't look at the box score for it? It won't let me pull up the box score for the exact head-to-head of it.
You should be able to.
Maybe it's because I'm on my phone. I'm not on the computer. But basically, 129 to 102 is what I beat you. I got actually a question for you, and I don't know what kind of cool name I want to give this. Kind of like, Ricky's Sneak of the Week. It's basically the question I'm asking you, and you guys can come up for a name for it if you want to make it a recurring topic every so often. It's basically I'm asking you, is this player going to be for real? Or like the James Conner question you asked me, was the week before a fluke? And the one I'm throwing at you is Taylor Gabriel. First 2 weeks, 2 points, goes off against the Washington Redskins for 26.2 points, had 3 scores. Maybe you're not expecting the same exact numbers against Minnesota, but moving forward for Taylor Gabriel, was this a fluke or was this for real what we could see out of Gabriel moving forward?
That many points is a fluke, but that many points is usually a fluke out of most people. I think that Taylor Gabriel, just based off what we saw last year, he was more involved in the offense than he was in the last 2 weeks before his big week 3 explosion. So I think that he can definitely get more involved. Hopefully not too much more involved because I still want Allen Robinson to stay involved because I have him. But it's not about me on this. It's something where I think Taylor Gabriel just had a really good night and he was able to exploit that part of Washington's defense. But I think that going forward, don't expect a game like that every week, but you could certainly look for probably 60 yards and maybe a touchdown. That's reasonable.
If you had Taylor Gabriel, you might have beat me.
But it also, thanks, Ricky, I know how to do math sometimes, but a lot of it's going to depend on Mitch Trubisky. Can he get the ball out of his hands, and can he work it down the field?
Do you think then last week for the Bears offense, fluke or for real?
They went against a really bad Washington defense. We'll find out this week.
Okay. Because this week they go against, obviously, a really good defense in the Vikings. Last question I got for you, and this is nothing to do with fantasy, but it has to do with fantasy football. You are the GM of the Washington Redskins. Injury, walking boot aside for Case Keenum, moving forward this season, I'm not just talking about this week, I'm talking about this week and beyond. If you're the Redskins, do you start Case Keenum or do you do what the Giants did and say, fuck it, Dwayne Haskins, it's your job moving forward?
100% I'm going with Dwayne Haskins. And the reason being is because it's not necessarily anything against Case Keenum. He had a really bad week this past week against the Bears, but in his first couple of games, he really looked respectable. I mean, he looked very respectable in the game against the Eagles, that's for sure. I think that Case Keenum's not going to be the guy. It's Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins was drafted to be the guy. Why not have him go into these games or in a season where they're not going to be all that good? They're not supposed to be that good. Why not have him start now and get his feet wet so he can have some experience as opposed to giving it to Case Keenum the entire season or most of the season and then at the end saying, all right, here, we're going to just throw you in now. Do it now. Do it now. Put Dwayne Haskins in. Case Keenum, thank you. We knew you weren't going to be the answer, but we needed to have you as a placeholder until we figured out who was going to be the answer, and I think that's going to be Dwayne Haskins. I would play him now.
I totally agree. I just want to give your thought, because that's been something I've been thinking about all fucking week. It's all week, because I'm starting Dwayne Haskins. Look what happened to the Giants. They started Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones made it like, hey, Ricky, you were talking about me last week, right? You weren't talking about Josh Allen. You were talking about me. When I was talking about the guy who wears the royal blue and the red, and yeah, I was talking about Daniel Jones. Who's Josh Allen? No, Josh Allen had a good week, but didn't expect that out of Daniel Jones. With 2 touchdowns on the ground, 2 through the air.
Last week, the Giants looked like absolute geniuses for taking him number 6 overall in the draft.
Yeah, and they made Dave look like a genius too, because he, just to be the devil's advocate, went against Sean and I was like, no, it was a smart pick. And now he looks like a genius because he actually said it on a podcast.
Wow, went against Sean. That's interesting. Well, folks, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much for watching and listening this week as we talked about Melvin Gordon, supposed to be coming back today, Thursday, when this is coming out, and Saquon Barkley's injury, a big one for fantasy owners. Where do they turn to? We talked about it, and then our starts and sits. Certainly make sure you listen to those. Go back and listen to those as well. Some interesting ones in Ricky's sneak or sneaky picks of the week. And make sure you comment down below. Let us know what you think. Ask any questions you are curious about, or of course do it on Twitter. I'm at young_swan19 and Ricky's at Ricky Widmer. So I think that you guys have done a pretty good job of doing that, but make sure you keep that up because we love interacting and love being able to give our opinions, even though we're not always right, but pretty much all the time.
And also I like how Candyman, who hit us up on Twitter about his trade, looks good to trade away Le'Veon Bell after that 5-point performance last week.
Yeah, I guess so.
After I was like, I wouldn't have given up Bell. Hey, you look smart after a week. Put the foot in my mouth.
But he got Odell, and he didn't do much either.
No, he didn't.
So that'll wrap it up for us today. Again, remember, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com for just $1 a month. You can help support our podcast, which we always do enjoy that. So make sure you go do that if you can spare the $1. And obviously, I know you can. So that is going to wrap it up for us this week. For Ricky Widmer, I'm Brandon Swanson saying so long, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in. Week 4 in the NFL. Enjoy it.